अस्सलाम वालेकुम। तो आप सब कैसे हैं? अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आप सब ठीक होंगे। फिर से मैं एक वीडियो पर रिएक्शन करने वाली हूँ। ये कैनेडियन एथिस्टिक है जिसने इस्लाम कबूल किया, क्यों किया, किस लिए किया। हर एक इंसान के पीछे एक नई नई स्टोरी होती है और अलग भी होती है। तो चलिए बिना वक्त ज़ाया किए वीडियो को स्टार्ट करते हैं और उनकी ही स्टोरी, उनकी ही जुबानी सुनते हैं।
Hello, Salih. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation as towards Return TV. We are very happy to have you with us. I want to first ask, who is Will Salih? Can you tell us briefly about your life, please?
Wa alaikum salam. Alhamdulillah, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been very much looking forward to it. So in brief, I grew up in Western Canada in the mountains, and as we grew up, no religion in our household. In fact, it was more of an atheist kind of family. I didn't believe in God. God was for weak people who needed a crutch to get by in life. That was kind of my upbringing about religion. When I was really little, the only thing that there was to do certain times was the community had a Jehovah's Witness, which is a denomination of Christianity, a Kingdom Hall. Everybody kind of went. And my dad is a biker from back in the day, and big beard, tattoos. So they just, when you meet people, so we would end up going there once in a while. And for me, it was an opportunity to dress up as a kid with a suit on, and a little tie, but that was really it. It was the only time we'd ever been to church, and it wasn't because we were looking for God as a family. It was because there was nothing else to do. I had never heard about Islam. I had never heard about Muslims until I was in high school. That was 9/11 was the first time I ever heard about Muslims, and for my entire high school years, we had the war on terror in the Middle East, and that was the main indoctrination, I would say, about my understanding of Islam. When you grow up in that environment, you do deal with a lot of prejudice, racism, and all of these sort of things. And then from that point, it's a very long journey of exploration and traveling around the world and coming to understand faith. And then later into my early 20s, I actually discovered Islam. Like in my early high school years, probably around 2003, the hard drugs really hit our town, and it just devastated our town. There's so many instances in my life of people that died because of drugs, that were stabbed and were killed, prison, and just all of these things that are just so just destructive. When I was 17, I went to work in Vancouver, and I went on a Friday night to the east end of Vancouver, and I was shocked, because this is in I think it's the capital of the world, is this very small portion of Hastings and Maine in Vancouver. I have many friends that have died from drug overdoses, have destroyed their lives. One of my friends growing up, I actually heard about this a couple of years ago, since I'd moved, but he just had a bath, but he was intoxicated and he drowned in the bathtub. New baby and young, maybe 2 years older than me. I was discussing earlier with you, one of my closest friends, in and out of jail, killed somebody. And these things are not unique, unfortunately. My brother-in-law committed suicide. I lost my sister to a fentanyl overdose a few years back.
Your sister?
My sister, yeah. One of the biggest problems is that you might not question God's existence, but you certainly will question when you look around and you see. I remember, one instance they have an annual baseball tournament, and there's right on a campground, and it's all parties. Everybody's drinking, and one of the nights in particular, I just came from one group and we're hanging out in the next group, and then my friend comes and he's covered in blood. He got stabbed all over the place, just soaked in blood. And I'm like, what's going on? Going with another friend, same thing. He's sliced up, and it's really hard to look at those things and not think, this is not going to end well. Then I started to realize that for me, where am I going to end up? What is my story going to look like? So I made it a point that I said, what? Okay, I want to get married. I don't know how, I don't know who, I don't know where, but I have to change myself. When I made that decision, I gave up, all the bad stuff that I was doing, and I just walked away from that whole life.
How did your journey to Islam start?
So it started, when I had decided, I want to get married and I have to change my ways, and I moved to a new town. I was just applying for jobs, and I walked past Future Shop is called, electronics store, and I thought, whatever, let's just try. And eventually, after 3 months, I hired as a seasonal employee. I met my wife, who would later become my wife, and she was the first Muslim that I'd ever met. It was meeting her, and then it just flipped my whole understanding of my upside down, right? Because the conversation started with, she said, I'm a Muslim. I'm like, well, okay, what is that? And then so she said, X, Y, Z, and I'm like, but I believe ABC about in these people, and she said, you're totally wrong, right? And that's where the first confrontation came about my understanding of Islam to someone who's an actual Muslim. Her father was the head of the Muslim association there in the town that I moved to, and that's really what triggered it, because I don't like to think of myself as an ignorant person, or when you bring me facts that I have to argue with you to try to refute the facts, even though it's the truth. So that's really what sparked my journey in the very beginning, about trying to understand, this Western media propaganda machine that's been indoctrinating me since, 2001. So that's a lot of years of just constant bombardment, and that's the, everything that's happened in Palestine at those times, in Iraq and Afghanistan, in general. And so it was just like, I believe this, or at least I was told this, taught this, indoctrinated with this, and this person who has firsthand experience of being that is telling me I'm totally wrong. So that's where the journey really kind of started. During that initial conversation, we talked for like 3 hours. I was fascinated with, she'd never been to a party. She'd never smoked a cigarette. She'd never drank alcohol. She'd, never had a boyfriend. Like, all of these things, these concepts were so foreign to me. And I'm like, how is this possible? And she just said, that's my faith. That's how I was raised, and culture and faith, the Muslim culture and the Muslim faith. And I was fascinated, like that. I'm seeing this firsthand. And for me, I was like, that's it. That's the girl. That's the one. That night. We had that conversation, and then once I started to look into that, got a little bit muddy with everything, trying to understand. It was very difficult. And I got a DVD. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but Sheikh Khalid Yassin from the States. Yeah. The Purpose of Life. That lecture changed my life. I listened to it on repeat, and I was just fascinated that he's literally, as I've briefly discussed, he's literally answering and giving a blueprint for the solution to all of the problems that we all complain about here in the West, that there is no solution to. He's literally giving you the blueprint. But in the beginning, he said something that was so indelible, like in my mind, and that is that it's like a glass of water. Your heart is a receptacle, like a glass of water. If you turn that glass over, it doesn't matter how much water you pour, you're never going to fill it up. But once you yourself open up, then you can fill it.
And what was the thing that made you say that, okay, I'm going to be Muslim? That's it. I'm just taking this step now. So what made you say that, this final leap?
It was, I think, the realization that is this book unchanged, right? But it has all of those answers. And remember, I had said that I believe that if God was real, he wouldn't leave us without instruction. And it was once I understood the Quran as being a book that is unchanged, then it really kind of hit me that, these other religious books, and I've studied a bit in different religions, and when you look at the Quran itself, like, take the book, throw it away. It literally doesn't matter. You can have it replicated in a day, word for word, exactly the same dialect as it was, 1400 years ago, through the oral transmission. Then it was really an important factor for me. And then I was like, okay, there's no way I can,
How was your Shahada moment? Can you tell us how you felt?
It was intimidating. So after the brothers had finished the salah, they said, we went inside, and there was probably like 30 people. So I'm sitting there, right? I'm a 23-year-old guy. It's like 30 people sitting there just like looking at me. I don't know. This is weird. And when the Imam asked me, he said, do you have like any questions that we could help you with? And after witnessing that, I said, like, I have so many questions. I was like, but I know that this is what I'm meant to be. I'm meant to do is this. And I took my Shahada right there in front of my future father-in-law, my future brother-in-laws, and future community that I would stand in front of and lead for the prayer. It was emotional, like so many things flying through my mind, right? Like my family, what are they going to think? As an atheistic approach that hated religion and indoctrinated, worse than myself. But it didn't matter, honestly, And then as you start to see, as you learn, the struggles of the Prophet ﷺ and his life and everything that he had to go through. We all have struggles. We all have difficulties and hardships and trials. And then a couple of years went by where I was really kind of struggling as a new Muslim, no environment really, until one of the brothers, actually the brother that called the adhan that brought me to tears, he invited me to go with them for 3 days here and there, and I really started to be able to practice with Muslims surrounding me and be able to ask questions and learn how to pray properly and learn how to do all of these things. And then that's where that journey began. And then, you know, being able to work on myself, learn the religion. I went home from that, the 4 months, and I became the imam in the masjid for 3-4 years, giving lectures to, you know, the churches would come, the school board would come, you know, the lectures for Jummah and these things, and then it really kind of started to set in. Like it's amazing.
And now going back to the story with your future wife, and how did that play out? And how did you get married in the end? So can you tell us about?
Yeah. So subhanallah.
Have you noticed something? While watching this video, you don't see any ads. Since Towards Eternity is a non-profit organization, we can only produce these videos through your support. If you want to be a part of this good deed, donate to Towards Eternity and don't miss this golden opportunity.
And now going back to the story with your future wife, and how did that play out? And how did you get married in the end? So can you tell us about?
Yeah. So subhanallah, even to go back. So the first time I walked into the building, which was for training, 3 months before I even met her, I saw her.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, she's beautiful, right? But then I never spoke to her for 3 months. Right, and then when we spoke, there was an obvious connection. You know that we decided. I mean, later on, you know, having to work together and conversate. I told her the night that we met. I don't know if she's. I've shared this, so it's okay.
Yeah, you shared it.
You know, she said, you know, that as a Muslim, you know, we believe everything happens for a reason. It's the plan of God, right? She's like, I wonder what us meeting. She's like, I wonder what the purpose of this is. And I said, well, it's because we're supposed to get married and have lots of kids. I was a little bit bold. I was a little bit upfront.
In your first meeting, you said?
Yeah, the very first time I ever spoke to her. And she kind of like laughed and was like, wow, this is weird. And yeah, so the brother who had called the adhan that made me tear up was actually a family friend of hers, her parents. And he became like my mentor. And so he proposed on my behalf. And it was absolutely not, don't ever mention this again. No.
Straight no.
Straight no. Absolutely not. So it took 5 years from the time that we had met until I had come back from Pakistan. And so we went back, and so again, same thing, you know, he went on my behalf to propose to the family, and it was like an even harder no this time. It was like, no, don't ever even bring it up to my face again. Absolutely not.
Who was the person? Was
mother-in-law.
Okay.
Father-in-law loved me because he prayed behind me in the masjid. You know, he listened to my khutbahs and speeches, and he was there, so he knew me like quite well, and he was fine with it. But when mom said no.
And what happened that your mother-in-law's opinion changed?
So this is the beauty of, you know, in English, we say that, you know, the Lord works in mysterious ways. This is one of those times. It was the last 10 days of Ramadan. I was doing i'tikaf in the masjid. And they would come as a family for Taraweeh. And I would call the adhan, because we had an imam come for the Hafiz to lead the Taraweeh. So I would call the adhan, and so she really liked it. She didn't know who was making the noise, but it turns out it was me. When they went home, and my mother-in-law asked my father, she's like, who is this person giving the speeches? And that is so beautiful. And he's like, that's the guy that you said no to. And she's like, what? Really? And it was an ayat of the Quran she was reading, if my memory suits me correctly. And it was, I don't remember the exact ayat, but it was something about, you know, not judging people, but giving them a chance to prove themselves. And she said that when she read that, everything changed. Allah just changed her heart, you know, and this is truly Allah is the one who is in control of our hearts. And one day, out of the blue, like nobody's expecting this, she wrote me a letter and she said, I would be honored if you would marry my daughter. And I'm like, what? And Eid al-Adha, we were married.
How did your family and people around you react to conversion?
Yeah, so when I became Muslim, so I have a brother that's special needs, and then 2 older sisters, and I mentioned one passed away. But when I became Muslim, it was like to my sisters, like, what are you? You're not from us, you know? And so that really, and we didn't live anywhere near each other, and so we were very kind of estranged. So I spent a couple of years, I would leave, you know, prayer mats out at my house when they would come to visit. Or I'd have a Quran here. So after some time, eventually, I was on the phone with my, I don't remember exactly the context. I'm pretty sure we were arguing about something, to be honest. Maybe it was about, again, don't quote me on this, but maybe my mom would know, about not coming for Christmas. I think that might have been, and then I said, I'm a Muslim. Like, this is not for me. And then her response was so classic. And she's like, what do you think, we're stupid? So to me, I'm like, mission accomplished, right? Mom, if you're watching, just saying, we've had that conversation, it's your turn. And we had a couple of arguments, me and my dad. Nothing, dramatic, but the biggest thing is when I changed my name. That's when it was like, how dare you? Because I'm the last son, like I'm the last in my family lineage. Like, my name ends with me. If I don't have a son, that's it, that name doesn't carry on. So then it just became Muhammad William Saleh.
What impressed you the most about Islam?
What impressed me the most about Islam, initially, I would say, is the unity of the Muslims. When I took my Shahada, it was a group of brothers that had come from all over the world, and they were in our town, beautiful setting. And I had questions, and it was my wife's father, the head of the Masjid Association. And I had got in contact with him, and then he invited me to come. So I had went, and the brothers said, okay, we're just going to pray. And the adhan was called, and I'm not kidding, like tears just started to come. I didn't understand, obviously, what it meant, and it hit my heart. And then I saw them all pray together. You have Pakistanis and Africans, and and I'm sitting here as this white guy, and this whole spectrum of color and people, different languages, different everything, and they're coming together to pray. And that was like the initial thing. And when I saw this unity, and not based on color, like literally the furthest thing from anybody's mind is, what color are you, or where are you from? Right? It's just that unity of, it doesn't matter where you're from.
If you had not become a Muslim, what would you be doing now? What kind of situation would you be in?
Whew. Dead or in jail? Yeah, that's unfortunate, but when I look at my environment, I look at my surroundings, I look at my friends, I look at my culture, just given my environment and the condition of the people that I grew up with, I don't think it would have been good for me.
What impressed you the most about the Prophet ﷺ?
Subhanallah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Oh, that's a loaded question. What impressed me the most is when I look to him as an example of how to deal with the difficulties and hardships in my life. We had a pregnancy loss a few years back. And I would say probably the most difficult thing for me as a father is to come home and tell your kids that their sibling has died. And it, to this day, it brings tears to my eyes. It just shatters my heart. And not so much for me, but their reaction, right? And then I look at a man who lost all of his children except for one in his lifetime. Yeah. And I look to a man who his own family turned against him. They tried to kill him. They boycotted him. They starved him. All of these things that happened in his life on the difficult side. And yet he remained steadfast. And yet he prayed his salah. He fasted during the month of Ramadan. There was nothing that was too difficult for him to bear. So us as parents, us as Muslims, us as human beings, and we look to his example of the sheer resilience, the faith that he had in the message of Islam. Through all of that, the conquest of Mecca, coming back home and coming and saying, this is a day of mercy. We're not here to fight, kill, whatever, that this is not what we're here for. And so when I look to him, I see such an example for us to follow and to find solace in, when we look at him and those difficulties.
If there was a chance to speak to the entire non-Muslim population in the world, what would you like to say to them if you had just a few moments?
I would say that the issues that you deal with, that we all have, the struggles that you go through, there is a solution for that. And unfortunately, that solution is being willingly kept from you by people who don't want you to discover the truth. And they don't want you to discover the truth because if you do, you will no longer be reliant upon their system in which they've created. You will free yourself, as they say, from the matrix. So you will free yourself from that in your understanding and your purpose in your life. That we have a purpose. And our purpose is not to fall into these traps of, just becoming part of this well-oiled machine that just destroys everything in its path. Your purpose is much bigger than that. And once you truly accept the fact that I have to be humble, I cannot be arrogant, then you start looking into Islam. You start understanding that, wait a second, this is the solution to all of the problems that I have. Not only the problems that I have, but as an economic solution, as a solution to the political situations, it is the answer to all of those problems if you take the time to understand it.
देखा आपने वीडियो कितनी खूबसूरत थी, माशाल्लाह वीडियो बहुत प्यारी थी। उन्होंने अपने किस तरह से उन्होंने अपनी लाइफ को किस स्ट्रगल से इस्लाम को कबूल करने के बाद कितने स्ट्रगल्स उन्होंने देखे, क्या क्या उन्होंने सब बताया। दुनिया में सब लोग इस्लाम दीन को जान रहे हैं, समझ रहे हैं, कुरान को पढ़ रहे हैं, समझने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, लेकिन हम मुसलमान दीन और इस्लाम को बहुत लाइटली ले चुके हैं। ऐसा सोच रहे हैं कि जन्नत हमारे लिए फिक्स है। ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है। हमें तो सबसे ज़्यादा अल्लाह से डरना चाहिए, क्योंकि हम जानते हैं कि क्या है इस्लाम में, क्या दीन है, कुरान में क्या बताया, अल्लाह हमें किस लिए भेजा, अल्लाह हमें अपनी इबादत के लिए भेजा है। तो आपको और हमको अल्लाह नेक हिदायत दे। इसी के साथ वीडियो को एंड करती हूँ। लाइक शेयर कमेंट करना मत भूलिए, जो नहीं है वो सब्सक्राइब कर लीजिए। फिर मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में, तब तक के लिए अस्सलाम वालेकुम।